Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Shai, Bahasham Recha Kodesh. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Genesis, the 8th chapter, as the Lord has begun already flooding the earth. And we now have Noah and his family in the ark as the Lord continues to flood the earth. So this is Genesis chapter 8, verse 1. And God remembered Noah and every living thing and all the cattle that was with him in the ark. And God made a wind to pass over the earth, and the waters assuaged. So once the Lord remembered Noah, he sent, it's interesting, kind of like how he sent a wind during the time of Moses when he pointed his staff and then the waters parted. So when the Lord sent that wind, it commenced the waters to start to now, when it says assuaged, it means it started to recede. Okay, so it was no longer prevailing on the face of the earth. Now, it doesn't mean the water disappeared, but it just means that the water now started to go down little by little. Shakak, it says here, to subside. There you go, to decrease. The fountains also of the deep and the windows of heaven were stopped, and the rain from heaven was restrained. So the water coming from the bottom and the rain coming from the top ceased. And as it says here, it says were stopped and was restrained, and the waters returned from off the face of the earth continually. So it started to once again recede, and the water level started to go down little by little. And after the end of the 150 days, the waters were abated. The waters being abated here does not mean that the earth was dry now. What it means is that it was at the end of the 150 days, the waters that were, because they prevailed upon the face of the earth for that period of time, but abated meaning that now they started to recede. And the ark rested in the 7th month. So the flood started in the 2nd month of Noah's 600th year, and in the 7th month, on the 17th day of his 600th year, the ark rested on upon the mountains of Ararat. And I believe Ararat is in Armenia. See, Mount Ararat map. I believe they said, yeah, some like by Turkey / Armenia-ish region, or maybe it's just Turkey. Let's see. Yeah, so it's more on the eastern side of Turkey, closer to Armenia. Yeah, right there, as they place it over there. So in any case, and the ark rested there because that, as it says, on the mountains of Ararat. So that had to be likely one of the tallest mountains at the time, where the ark was able to set on it, but there was still water all around. It's just that the ark wasn't floating on the top of the water now because the waters were going down, and so was the ark. And the waters decreased continually until the 10th month. On the first day of the month were the tops of the mountains seen. So now the rest of the mountains, right, were now starting to become visible, the tops of them, because once again, the water started to recede, more and more and more. Now we're at the 10th month. And Noah and his family are still in the ark at this point. And it came to pass at the end of 40 days, so an additional 40 days later, that Noah opened the window of the ark which he had made. And he sent forth a raven, which went forth to and fro until the waters were dried up from off the earth. So it would go back and forth, periodically checking, right, until eventually the waters were completely dried from the face of the earth. It says here, NLT, the bird flew back and forth and released a raven. The bird flew back and forth until the flood waters on the earth had dried up. Similarly, right, in verse 8, also he sent forth a dove from him to see if the waters were abated from off the face of the ground. But the dove found no rest for the sole of her foot, and she returned unto him into the ark, for the waters were on the face of the whole earth. So he let out the dove. It flew, and there were no trees that it could see or anything like that. So there wasn't any good place for it to land. That's what it means by the rest for the sole of her foot. And so because it couldn't find any place to land, it returned back to the ark. And because that was the proof to Noah that, okay, the waters are still high upon the face of the earth. Even though it's going down, it's still flooded at this point. Then he put forth his hand and took her and pulled her in onto him in the ark. And he had to do this, right? Because he was on a higher altitude than the rest. Remember, the mountains that he landed on were pretty high. So, you may not be able to see everything else directly under you, considering how high or how tall the ark itself was. So you didn't want to risk opening the door or removing the covering, and it's not the appropriate time yet. Hence, he used this method of sending out the dove. So the dove came back. He set his hand out. It landed on his hand. He pulled it back into the ark. And he stayed yet another 7 days, or yet other 7 days. And again, he sent forth the dove out of the ark. So he waited another week and then let the dove out again. And the dove came in to him in the evening, and lo, in her mouth was an olive leaf plucked off. So what does that tell you? If she was able to come with an olive leaf, that means that the waters are low enough to where the trees are now visible. So Noah knew that the waters were abated from off the earth. So that was his indicator. Because at first the waters, even the trees were covered under the water. And he stayed yet other 7 days. So he waited an additional week and sent forth the dove, which returned not again unto him anymore. And why didn't it return? Because it was good now, right? It could land. The waters had gone down enough to where it could land on trees and go about without having to rely on the ark as its resting place anymore. And that was an indicator to Noah as well. And it came to pass in the 601st year. So remember, the flood came in the 2nd month of the 600th year of Noah. So the next year, right, in the 601st year, in the 1st month, the 1st day of the month, the waters were dried up from off the earth. And Noah removed the covering of the ark. Now, it doesn't specify whether this covering was like the roof or it was just like opening the door, but it was something, right, that allowed him to be able to get a better view. So it says here, he removed the covering of the ark and looked, and behold, the face of the ground was dry. And in the 2nd month, on the 7th and 20th day of the month, was the earth dried. So now it was completely like dry. You could see, all right, it's good now, because the waters can recede, but the ground might still be wet, right? And you have like your puddles and your mud and so on and so forth. And then eventually, as it goes lower and lower and lower, now things actually, become fully dry. And God spake unto Noah, saying, Go forth of the ark, thou and thy wife, and thy sons, and thy sons' wives with thee. So now you can finally leave the ark. And now it's been over a year, or just about a year, since they went into the ark, and the waters started to come upon the earth. Bring forth with thee every living thing that is with thee, of all flesh, both of fowl and of cattle, and of every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth, that they may breed abundantly in the earth, and be fruitful and multiply upon the earth. So now, just as he had once led them into the ark, he now brought them out. And Noah went forth, and his sons, and his wife, and his sons' wives with him, every beast, every creeping thing, and every fowl, and whatsoever creepeth upon the earth, after their kinds went forth out of the ark. And Noah builded an altar unto the Lord Yahweh, and took of every clean beast, and of every clean fowl, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. So at least now you can see why he took so many of the clean beasts, because he wasn't going to offer an unclean animal on the altar. Number two, when it says of every, it doesn't mean that of all 7 pairs, he sacrificed all 7. What it means is of the sacrificial animals, he took some. So you have 7 pairs of say sheep, 7 pairs of oxen and cattle. He would take maybe 1 or 2 of that oxen or cattle, not all 7 pairs, because then what's left to reproduce? In any case, he offers the burnt offerings on the altar, and burnt offerings are in the law. If Noah did not know the law on the burnt offerings, and you can go read in the law, which we'll get there, but you can read it and see the details of how it should be done. So there are actual instructions on how the offerings should be offered. If Noah didn't know that, because the Lord is specific, how would he have offered a burnt offering onto the Lord? And how would Noah have known that? It had to have been taught to him by who? His father. And how did his father know that? Going all the way back to Adam. So this was they had these laws, right? In in Genesis 6, it says that because of the violence and corruption on the earth, they had basically perverted the way of the Lord, right? So it just wasn't physically written down until the time of Moses, but the laws were in existence and they were passed down orally. Like, with certain traditions, like customs and stuff, when you grow up in a certain area, like even if you go to the Philippines, right, or just the different parts of the world, there are customs and manners in which the people are raised with. And those are not necessarily written down in a book somewhere, right, where they go and teach you, but that's how you're raised, right? Everybody raises their children that way, right? This is, you do this, you do that. On this day, you do this. On this day, you do that. This is how you do this. When you meet somebody older than you, this is how you treat them, blah, 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 so on and so forth. Those things don't necessarily have to be written down somewhere, because it's taught to the youth. They grow up with it and they teach it to their children. And it was like that in this time. Verse 21, and the Lord Yahweh smelled a sweet savor, and the Lord said in his heart, I will not again curse the ground any more for man's sake. Because why did the Lord curse the ground? Because of man. And that's why Noah was called Noah, because his father said he will comfort us from the labor we have to do for the ground that is cursed. Or else until today we'd be struggling. There wouldn't be such a thing as the land of milk and honey if the ground was cursed. But the Lord lifted that and said he would no longer do that. For the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth, right? Meaning, like, regardless of the evil imaginations of, creation of man's heart. That's why it tells you, I think in Jeremiah, that the heart is desperately wicked, right? The flesh, that is. Neither will I again, because why did the Lord curse the ground in the first place? Because of the imagination of man's heart. Neither will I again smite anymore every living thing as I have done. So somebody might say, oh, well, isn't he going to destroy it again? But he said, as I have done. And how did he do it? By water. So yeah, he's going to bring a second death, but it won't be in the same manner as the first. And this time, a lot more people will be delivered than just Noah or just 8 souls. Verse 22, while the earth remaineth, so long as the earth exists, seed time and harvest, so the planting and the harvest, and the cold and the heat, and the summer and the winter, and day, these are the seasons, and night and the ordinances shall not cease. All right. So that's why we have these cycles and these seasons even till today. And that brings us to the end of the book of Genesis, the 8th chapter. And Lord willing, that was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Recha, Kodash. Until next time, Shalom.